Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Hamid Elmir. I am the host of podcast with Dr. E. At this podcast, I sit with the world's experts in health, education, and community development to talk about current health challenges and ask them to share their experience, knowledge, and insight with the rest of the nations across the world so that we can learn from experts across the globe. Today, I have an amazing physician with us on the show today. Dr. Evan Hirsch is with us. Welcome, Dr. Hirsch.
Hey, Dr. Hamid, thanks so much for having me on.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce Dr. Evan Hirsch. He is an MD. He's a world-renowned fatigue expert and is the founder and CEO of the International Center for Energy and Fatigue and of the Virtual MD Initiative. He suffered with fatigue for 5 years before he achieved resolution using the Fix Your Fatigue program that he pioneered in his medical practice. Through his best-selling book, podcast, and online programs, he has helped thousands of people around the world optimize their energy naturally. And he is on a mission to help 1 million people. He's a board certified physician in family medicine and integrative medicine. And when he's not at the office, you can find him singing musicals, dancing, and playing basketball with his family. Dr. Evan is known as the international fatigue expert, the fatigue doc, post-COVID fatigue expert. And we will learn a lot from him today, especially during this hard time and this pandemic. So again, Dr. Evan, let's get started. And the very first question, please tell me about your why and why you do what you do.
So, when I started my residency back in 2004, I thought I was at the top of my game. I was going into my training in family medicine. I met my wife, we fell in love, and 3 months later, she couldn't get out of bed. And so she had fatigue, and I didn't know how to help her. In the conventional medical system, we're looking at things like thyroid, but then liver disease, lung disease, heart disease. There's a lot of stuff that's really extreme, and once that's ruled out, there's not much else. And so I was asking my attendings, I was doing as much research as I could while working 80-hour weeks. I couldn't help her, and it felt incredibly powerless. So she got better after about 3 years by doing a number of natural things and taught me a lot through that process. And then we got married, we had a child, I graduated residency, I started my own practice, and then a couple of years later, I got fatigue. And it lasted for 5 years, and it just about destroyed everything in my life, just about destroyed my marriage, my relationships, my relationship to my new daughter. She wants daddy play with me, and all I could do was lie on the couch. My business, I had a big brick and mortar clinic, but I had to keep hiring other people to do my jobs because I could only function for a couple hours per day. My brain fog was so bad that I couldn't focus on the patient who was sitting in front of me. And then finally I said, okay, I'm done with this. This is enough. And I decided that I was going to go on this mission of figuring out because I wasn't the best patient. So I had to figure out how to take care of myself and how to figure this out. And so that's what I did. And I explored every single training and every single book and everything that I could all about fatigue. And I figured out all the causes that I had and I fixed them and I achieved great energy. And now I've been able to help, fortunately, thousands out there.
That's wonderful. It's a very inspiring story, Dr. Evan. And you are definitely helping a lot. This story is really inspiring, and thank you for everything you do. And speaking of the fatigue, how do you or how do you actually diagnose your clients or patients, or how does someone know in that they have fatigue?
So the best way to determine whether or not somebody knows whether or not they have fatigue is if they're sleeping 7 to 9 hours per night and they're still tired during the day. Now, sometimes people say, but I'm not tired during the day, but you might be relying on caffeine. So
Hmm.
if you're consuming multiple cups of coffee or soda pop or 5 hour energy or whatever it is, or you're napping during the day, you're like, oh, I'm fine as long as I take a nap. Like those are all signs that there is a problem, right?
Hmm.
Now, there's a lot of people who are having sleep issues, and those sleep issues are causing them to be fatigued during the day. But if you are getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night and you're still tired during the day, that means that there's something to work on here and that you do have fatigue.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great point to an easy one to know. And some people believe that just taking a nap is good. And is there a number, like how many times? If it's more than, I think one time should be not a big deal, right? Like a few minutes or so.
You mean the power nap?
Yeah,
So
power nap. Yeah.
so most of the time, so it's not, if you think about how you were when you were 18, you
Hmm.
probably didn't need to nap and you had a lot of energy.
Right.
So if you need to nap now, it means that it's kind of a harbinger. It's kind of, something that's saying, hey, you need to pay attention to this because all of the causes of fatigue that are making you tired are also the causes of diseases of longevity, whether it's heart attack, heart disease, stroke, Alzheimer's, cancer. All of those causes are the same. So it's really important that people pay attention now. So I think that if you need a nap, you take it. But what I find over and over again is that when we fix the problems, the causes that people have for their fatigue, then the naps go away. And so that tells me that the naps aren't normal. Like you shouldn't have to nap.
Great point. So speaking of the causes of fatigue, could you please tell us what are some of the causes of fatigue?
Yeah, so there's really 10 categories of causes that we're looking at, and we break those into deficiencies and toxicities. So deficiencies are things that are not in the body that are supposed to be, and toxicities are things that are in the body that aren't supposed to be. Now, the toxicities really are most important because oftentimes they're causing the deficiencies.
Hmm.
But when we're looking at all of those causes initially of why somebody is tired, this is what we see, and these are the things we want to replace. So, in terms of the deficiencies, we're looking at deficiencies in lifestyle habits. So, not enough sleep. So, people who are burning the candle at both ends. Not enough good food. So, people who are eating gluten, dairy, sugars. Not enough water. Not enough movement. Um, and then there's deficiencies in hormones, so not enough adrenal gland support, which manages our stress in our body, not enough thyroid support, not enough sex hormone support, not enough mitochondrial support, which is the energy center of every cell in the body, produces about 70 to 80% of our energy, and then not enough neurotransmitter support. Oftentimes, some of the things like serotonin, dopamine, and whatnot, that are deficient. So those are kind of the main deficiencies that we're looking at. Oh, and then vitamin and mineral support. So not enough B12 or magnesium or stuff like that. And then in terms of the toxicities, we're looking at heavy metals, chemicals, molds, infections, allergies, and negative emotional patterns.
Right.
So those are really the big ones that we're focused on because they're causing a lot of the damage to the mitochondria that we see in the deficiency part, and then also the damage to the hormones and the deficiencies in the nutrients.
Okay. Great. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that it's all these causes is a whole discussion itself, and to talk about all the different causes of fatigue and for the sake of time, we're not going to go into details about it. But what does it? Why is it so hard to treat fatigue, and what makes it so hard?
So this is a very interesting topic. Why does one person get better when they take us something and another person doesn't? Joe Schmo over here gets a B12 shot and he's all better. And then, Sally Sue over here gets a B12 shot and she doesn't notice a difference. So it all has to do with the causes that an individual has. So of those 10 categories, pretty much when I see people who have fatigue, they have something from 8 out of those 10 categories. But oftentimes it's a different something than somebody else. So if you've got causes 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and somebody else has causes 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10, obviously your treatments are going to be very different.
Absolutely. So it's yeah, people were even thinking about individualized kind of treatment for in medicine, and that's been a discussion for a while. And every body, every human being is different, and that's the
Hmm.
way also, when it comes to fatigue, as you said, like so many causes of fatigue, and it could be really different for different individuals, and how you approach it. I think it's also that going back to the very basic of medicine, which is you have to take a complete, like thoroughly um, medical background and history, and asking all the questions, and finding the root cause. I
Hmm.
think that would be very important, in order to to make a diagnosis and then go for treatment. And I'm sure that the um, your patients are benefiting a lot from the way that you approach, and how you ask those questions and finding out. And a lot of people these days, unfortunately, just because of a lot of these tensions during this pandemic, maybe the problems are even getting worse and deteriorating the health situations of people who are already in pre-existing conditions and having fatigue,
Hmm.
and then going from doctor to doctor or hospital to hospital, but not getting the treatment that they need, or finding that underlying cause. And discussions like this really helps a lot of people to find the right person, or the right place to go. And it also saves a lot of resources, and money wise, I mean, a lot of money too. And
Right.
yeah, so I know you have the fix your fatigue system, and could you tell us how many steps are there in there, and what is it exactly, the fix your fatigue system? Could you elaborate a little more on that, and in order to use it to treat the causes? I mean, yeah, these causes of the fatigue.
Yes. So the Fix Your Fatigue program is a four-step process. The first step in that is finding which causes you have. As you can see from what we talked about, the reason why oftentimes people aren't getting better is because they're not addressing the individual causes that they have. And so that's the first thing that you have to do. Now, fortunately, 75% of all of those causes can be determined by your symptoms alone. So when people join my program, they get the workbook that goes along with the course and all the additional support that we have. And they can go through that workbook, which is just like a checklist of symptoms, and they can determine 75% of their causes right after joining the program, usually within the first couple hours, without having any labs. And that's because, as you and I both remember from medical school, what we learned was that if you want to determine what the cause of somebody's problem is, 90% or so is going to be history and symptoms, and then 10% is going to be physical exam and labs,
Right.
right? So history and symptoms still trump everything else. So it's just an important part of this process. So you figure out which causes you have, and then our program helps to determine which labs you need to order so that you're not just spending money arbitrarily. And then step two, you start off by replacing the deficiencies. And so some people might say, well, Dr. Evan, you just talked about how this is all about the toxicities, which we address in step four. Why are we starting with step two and replacing the deficiencies? And a lot of it has to do with the fact that in order to remove the toxicities in step four, we have to have the base set. We have to have those deficiencies remedied to a certain degree in order for everything else to function better. So this is replacing adrenals and mitochondria and thyroid, what I call the big three that help everything else to function better. Sex hormone deficiency, vitamin and mineral deficiency, obviously working on lifestyle habits, making sure that you're going to sleep at the right time, drinking enough water, changing your meal plan. All of those things are going to be helpful. So that's kind of step two, replacing those deficiencies. And then step three is opening up the detoxification pathways. So when functioning normally, we are excreting toxins out of different parts of our body. So we're peeing them out, we're pooping them out, we're breathing them out, we're sweating them out. And so these are all parts of that process. And everything that we do is natural. I operate across state lines as a health coach and across national lines. And about a third of our clientele right now is international, and the European Union and Singapore and Australia and all that sort of stuff. And so as a health coach, the things that I'm recommending are natural, and that's what we found really work best as well. So all of these things are natural that open up the detoxification pathways, make sure the gut, the liver, the kidney, the lymph, which is the garbage system of the body, all of those pathways are open and patent, so that when you start going into step 4, you start grabbing those toxicities and bring them into the bloodstream, that they're actually able to get out of the body. Because if step 3 is not done, and I see this time and time again, you start grabbing something, bringing it into to try to detoxify it, whether it's a heavy metal, a chemical, or mold, or infection, whatever, and then it just goes right back into a different compartment in the body instead of allowing it to go out. And oftentimes, there's a lot of people who mean well out there, natural docs, functional medicine docs, integrative docs, conventional docs, but they're skipping this very important part of the process, which is going to save a lot of time and energy and pain later on. So that's step 3. And then step 4 is removing those toxicities. So, the 100,000 pounds of heavy metals that are dumped into our oceans every year, and the 84,000 chemicals that we're exposed to on a regular basis, and half of the buildings in our country and in first world countries that have water damage, and most of those have mold, and all the all the infections that we have as well, whether it's Epstein-Barr, Lyme type infections, COVID-19 consequences, and then the negative emotional patterns that we have, and to removing all of those, that's really the crux of this process. And so that's the 4-step process, and our programs are 6 months long, and our goal is that you're 60 to 100% better at 6 months, depending on how long you've had these and how severe a lot of your problems are.
Well, excellent program, and thank you for describing that. I had actually a question. How long will your course be? I think you just mentioned that it's a 6 month course. That's great. So in that, at the very beginning, your clients will be evaluating themselves if they have fatigue or no. You have some kind of like quiz or something.
Yep. Well, we have a process of, we don't have a quiz right now up on the site, but we do have a process that they go through in the program to determine what causes they have. And then they have support in our online community, in our group Zoom calls, in our one-on-ones with for health coaching, as well as for nervous system retraining, to retrain your nervous system to get back into its parasympathetic, getting out of fight or flight, and getting back into rest and digest and healing. And so what I've tried to do is looked at all of the barriers that people have along the way and provide support so that people can have success. Because the gold in this program and in life really is about the follow-up.
Right.
It's really, how many times have people told us that, I saw this doctor, but there was no follow-up, or I didn't know where I was going. But when you actually know where you're going, you're going to be a lot more successful, especially if you have that support along the way for every single question that comes up, which is really important.
Absolutely, that's great. And you also mentioned about the group support group, which is also great between your clients, I guess, among your clients, so that they can even learn from one another, not only from yourself, right?
Lots of really smart people in our groups who've gone through the program, who've had their own experiences, who are bringing them in. So yeah, it's a brain trust. We're always, two heads are better than one. People have all sorts of
Absolutely.
disparate experiences, and they all have value.
Absolutely great. Speaking of those groups and getting, at least virtual, getting online or getting together and asking each other's how they're doing basically, and what are their experiences during this pandemic time. It's you know important than any time ever, um, and then there's also this term like post-COVID syndrome, and you being an expert in fatigue, and a lot of people probably experiencing different types of fatigue at this time, especially during working from home, or just all different tensions in this tough time. Could you just tell us a little bit about post-COVID syndrome, and what else is it called, and what is it exactly?
Yes, and I think that you mentioned kind of two things there. So there's COVID fatigue,
Hmm.
which is kind of fatigue that people have being at home from COVID, and that has different issues than post-COVID syndrome. And so I'll kind of separate those out and I'll take the COVID fatigue first. So COVID fatigue is pretty much you're at home, you're finding that you're more tired. Sometimes this can be from the stress that you're under. So, any sort of stressor, whether it's a mental, emotional, or physical stressor, is going to be more challenging on the human organism and it's going to make you more tired. And so, part of this is, and a big part of our program is changing your mindset, is changing how you look at the world, is changing what sort of things you're telling yourself on a regular basis. And a lot of times right now where people are at home, they're face to face with some of the things that they find most challenging, face to face with their relationship with their children, with their spouse, with they're not able to go hang out with their friends, they're not able to go blow off some steam at the pub, they're not able to go to work and get away from some of these things. And so that's kind of where some of these challenges that are coming in. There's new stressors of, obviously trying to support your kids in homeschool, managing different things, losing a job potentially. So a lot of that kind of plays into COVID. There's also some environmental issues, such as if you have mold in your home and now you're spending all of your time in your home, that can be more of an issue for you and potentially you can be more tired. So in terms of post-COVID syndrome, this is people who get COVID-19, whether a positive test or whether just based on their symptoms, and their symptoms go away or they think that they're gone, and then they come back a couple of weeks to a week later, or sorry, a couple of weeks to a month later, and then they persist. Now, sometimes they don't go away, so sometimes they just kind of hang on, where people get COVID, where maybe they've got a fever and a headache and loss of smell, and then some other generalized flu symptoms, and they just don't go away and they persist. And so what we're seeing now is, unfortunately, the last study that I saw, about 52% of people who have gotten COVID-19 acutely, about 52% are now progressing to post-COVID syndrome. So at this point, we're talking about potentially 10 million people who could end up with post-COVID syndrome. There's a number of people who still at about 8 months, people who got sick in March and in April, still 8 months later have these symptoms where they're really tired, they have headaches, they're getting new symptoms all the time, where oftentimes people will report that the symptoms that they had initially came and went, and now they're getting new symptoms, and that the new symptoms are worse, the old symptoms are better. So it's kind of like this evolution, and the thought around it is that the COVID-19 is living in the bloodstream and triggering the immune system, and it's causing the immune system to be hyperactive. So it ends up in this hyperactive state. People are now becoming more sensitive to foods, more sensitive to inhalants, whether it's grasses, weeds, animal dander, whatever it is. All of a sudden they're starting to react more. It appears that they're getting a lot of symptoms much like mast cell activation syndrome, or MCAS, where the immune system is hyperactive in this state. Now, there's some people, and I'm kind of rambling here, but I'm going to try to convey as much information as possible. There are some people who are curious about, well, is there actually live virus in the body all these months later? Where there was a recent study that showed that 50% of people who had COVID-19, got rid of it, have no symptoms now, still had live virus in their intestines on biopsy. So that's people who are completely asymptomatic. So they don't have any symptoms right now. And so imagine those people who have post-COVID syndrome. It's also called long haulers or long COVID, where they still have symptoms. I am very sure that they have large amounts of live virus that's still in their body. Now, that said, this is, why do some people get this post-COVID syndrome or long haulers and other people don't? And so part of that has to do with a lot of these causes that I'm talking about. Whether it's COVID-19 or whether it's Epstein-Barr virus, those are one cause out of all of those causes, right? So that cause of COVID-19 is also going to damage the mitochondria. It's going to end up damaging the adrenal glands and the hormones. It's going to play off of any sort of molds, heavy metals, chemicals, infections, other infections that are also present. So then that's why the picture is getting more and more complex. Plus, also, it seems like a lot of people are not really using some natural remedies to actually go after COVID-19. They're using some supportive things. They're antihistamines in order to be able to adjust the immune system, sometimes vitamin D, sometimes zinc and whatnot. But a lot of them are not using actual antivirals, whether it's herbal, whether it's pharmaceutical, in order to get after the virus. But then keeping in context that it is just one of these multitude of causes that have to be addressed.
Great, great. You laid it out really in a good way so people know exactly what's going on before, during COVID and some of the stressors that exacerbates, this problem. And then after COVID, what are some of the, signs and symptoms and what are some of the causes? And as you said, there's a lot, like we're already a year into this pandemic, and there's still a lot unknown about it, and research and studies still going on. And that story, that research was very interesting to find out, about post-COVID syndrome that you
Mhm.
mentioned about. I'm sure that there will be a lot of these research and of course a lot of efforts that frontliners are working tirelessly across the nation and across the world will definitely help. And now luckily that we have the vaccine, and as soon as the vaccine is distributed for people, hopefully things will get better, and I'm hopeful that it will get better. And again, as you said, the fatigue or the post COVID syndrome is something that would be a challenging um, time for healthcare providers as well as for people who've been through these challenges.
Right.
And hopefully it's not going to be that of a big concern, but we have to be cautious and know more about it so that we can find solutions for it.
Yeah,
And
and I think that, I mean, one positive coming out of this is that a lot of people who have chronic fatigue or myalgic encephalitis, as it's known in Europe,
mhm.
are going to, there's going to be, if there's going to be this spotlight that's now shown more on this post-COVID syndrome, and I think we're going to learn a lot that's going to end up helping those other folks.
Great, great. So, speaking of the treatment, and we talked about the causes, we talked about the treatment, and you have your program, you're helping, your clients. And do you think that you can help everyone with fatigue, or is there like times that you would say, well, I cannot help this situation, or is there a time like someone you cannot help with fatigue?
Yeah, anybody who tells you that they can help everybody with fatigue is selling you a bridge.
Right.
It's just not realistic. And some of that has to do with the fact that there are some causes that we don't know.
Mhm.
But what I have found is that I've never met anybody who has found all of their causes, fixed them, and still had fatigue. So it's really, as a simplistic model, it's a two-step process. You find the problem that you have or the problems that you have, and then you fix them, right? So whether it's a human resource issue at work, whether it's your car that needs to be fixed, if you find that the problem with your car is your carburetor, but you end up fixing your tailpipe, like you're not going to have success, right? So much like the human body, we want to find those causes. So most of the time that I see people when they are not better is just because they haven't found those causes. They haven't found whether or not they have heavy metals, chemicals, molds, infections, allergies, negative emotional patterns, or if they found it, they haven't worked on it. So, you know, when we're looking at all of these causes that I'm looking at, we're looking at 90 to 95% of all of the known causes. I'm sure there are some causes out there that we don't know about that we'll continue to learn more about, but it's really about shining a light on those and proceeding through a process to fix each one of those. And the likelihood for success is going to be much higher when you do that.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Evan. this show was really interesting to myself, and I'm pretty sure that it's been interesting for all the listeners who are listening and will be also listening to the recorded one on podcast. The um, last question is now, how can people find you and more and know more about your work? Could you please just tell us more about your work and how they can find you?
Yes, thank you for asking. So they can find me at fixyourfatigue.com. So that's FIXYOURFATIGUE.com. There's a bunch of educational information on there. I have a podcast. I have a free Facebook group that you can jump into. There's masterclass training. There's a free mini course on my website. So jump in there, get educated. And if you're interested in having some help on this journey, then reach out to us and schedule a call. We'll be happy to help you.
Great, thank you for mentioning that. And I'm pretty sure it's easy for people to remember. Fixyourfatigue.com, and I'm sure that a lot of people will be benefiting from your hard work there. And thank you again so much. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. And dear audience, please stay tuned for more amazing shows like this with Dr. E podcast. Thank you all and have a great day and happy holidays. Happy holidays to you too, Dr. Ivan.
You too.